Welcome for joining this presentation and discussion on our paper titled Touching and Being in Touch with the Menstruating Body. I'm Nadia, Campo, Woytuk. My co-authors are Louise, Juul, Søndergaard, Marianela, Ciolfi, Felice, and Madeline, Balaam. Our paper describes the design, deployment, and discussion of a research through design work called Curious Cycles. Curious Cycles is a set of objects and interactions which invite people who menstruate to explore their menstruating body throughout a full menstrual cycle, which is approximately a month. While there's been a rise in digital products and services concerning menstrual cycles and fertility in the industry, these tend to approach the body from techno-solutionist perspectives, framing menstruation as a problem to be remedied or controlled through technology, and casting aside the pluralism of menstrual experiences and bodies. These technologies also seem to intentionally avoid touching the body and its fluids, especially menstrual blood. And as previous literature in HCI has pointed out, these technologies focus around the body rather than engaging directly with it. Therefore, to situate a bit, this project draws from previous work in women's health and interaction design, also from feminist HCI, and is also influenced by somaesthetic interaction design, or soma design. So in this work, we propose touch as a way of knowing and understanding one's menstruating body, and this includes its fluids. I'd also like to mention that throughout the presentation, there are a few pictures of menstrual blood and some partial nudity, which will be indicated on the previous slide. So when we use touch, we draw from the literal and metaphorical meanings of touch discussed by feminist technoscience scholars Karen Barad and Maria Puig de la Bellacasa. So instead of producing knowledge by observing the body through vision, through data on a screen or things happening at the periphery of the body, we're interested in ways of generating knowledge through touch, touching the material, touching the body and its fluids. Touching can trouble or blur the idea that we have of who is doing the touching. As Bellacasa says, to touch is to be touched. And to touch oneself, to touch the menstruating body, entails touching and being in touch with the self. So all touching entails the infinite alterity, so that touching other is touching all others, including the self, and touching the self entails touching the strangers within. And this is a quote from Karen Barad. We find that these theories resonate clearly with our motivation to design menstrual technologies that support noticing and appreciating the body, but also as poetic metaphors that describe the process of how this act of touch has potential to create knowledge about the self, about being in touch with the self. So with this work, we ask, how can this be done in the context of menstrual cycles? How can knowledge and world-making processes be done through touching the menstruating body? So we created the Curious Cycles kit through a process of first-person perspective design explorations, workshops, and consultations with experts in fertility and menstrual cycles. It's also worth mentioning that the values associated with menstruation vary widely across cultures, and that this project took place in Sweden. The kit was designed to include tangible artifacts, a poster, and envelopes with drawing and writing prompts. This method shares many of the intentions present in Bill Gaver's cultural probes or Jane Wallace's work on design probes. The objects were linked to a poster, which in the style of an advent calendar, participants would open at different moments in their cycle and were prompted to interact with these objects. One of the primary prompts in the kit was to collect samples of your own menstrual blood, cervical mucus, and saliva, and to observe them attentively under a smartphone microscope, which had the shape of a 3D printed eye. These fluids were chosen because they are important signals and markers throughout the cycle. Another object in the kit was a handheld mirror and lamp, which prompted participants to closely observe their vulva, either while menstruating or not. With this, we intended to enable a kind of observation that goes beyond just looking, but looking closely, or to look with fingery eyes at an almost touching closeness. This sort of interaction has been very present throughout the history of women's health, and notably, vaginal self-examinations with speculums and mirrors were a central part of workshops organized by women's health collectives in the USA throughout the 1970s. When I told my mom about this project that I was working on, she immediately bought me a copy of the edition that she had of Our Bodies, Ourselves, which detailed how to perform these examinations at home. Therefore, these took place in non-medical and mundane surroundings. inspiring comfort and playfulness. And this was something we wanted to share with Curious Cycles. In the kit, the mirror/lamp and the microscope could be paired together to observe the fluid samples. Other objects and interactions included a heat pad with a body mapping activity, similar to the one that Michael has presented, and tools to aid collecting and observing the bodily fluids. We gave 5 sets of Curious Cycles to 5 women living in Stockholm, Sweden. They were of different ages and had different cultural backgrounds and were not currently using hormonal contraception. As well as the kits, each participant made use of an individual Instagram account, which they used as a visual diary. So the ways in which participants touched and looked at their menstruating body involved direct skin contact with the fluids, but also they used tools and secondary materials, such as their menstrual hygiene products. Therefore, their experiences of touch varied greatly depending on these products, the history of their use, and the spaces where the touching and looking was performed. One participant, who's named Maria in the paper, said that she paid attention to the color of the blood in order to tell if she was healthy or not, but that she wasn't only interested in touching and looking at her body for understanding biological processes or for conceiving or avoiding pregnancy, but also just for the sake of knowing and exploring her own body. Several participants managed to see the ferning patterns in their saliva, which are a sign of ovulation. As a participant called Emma explained, I did this every day until I saw the ferning patterns. I needed to see them. I really enjoyed it because I had no idea that the patterns would change. And I thought it was actually really aesthetically beautiful as well. And seeing how aesthetically pleasing it was, it also kind of gave me this new appreciation for it. So by seeing menstrual blood, mucus, and saliva as something more precious or valuable and knowledge-bringing rather than waste, and through the power of looking and touching over time, participants strive for this sense of aesthetic appreciation, of admiration, and attunement with their own body. Therefore, we believe that the future menstrual cycle technologies should help to directly challenge the stigma and the misunderstanding of these fluids, and in particular, menstrual blood. Although several participants already had a certain closeness to their bodies, they expressed the need to intentionally be invited to touch. Participant Laura explained how she always thought about looking at herself with a mirror, but she never did it until she had to, which was during the study. Therefore, we see the role of menstrual technologies to be a provider of this invitation, to entice touch by curiously looking, as well as supporting and confirming the knowledge of doing it. For example, one participant recalled that she would have benefited from an ovulation test to confirm what she learned by touching her cervical mucus. Another participant commented on the need to know what she was actually seeing under the microscope. So in addition to the knowledge that some of the mainstream menstrual technologies deliver, such as menstrual trackers that quantify the body, we must design menstrual technologies that support and complement the knowledge obtained through touch. Another thing that happened during the deployment of the Curious Cycles kit was that participants unexpectedly followed each other through their online diary and created an improvised network of support, giving each other advice on how to use the tools, but also encouraging the content that they shared. The fact that the Curious Cycles kit took up space in the participants' homes and required a fair amount of time dedication revealed tensions that might exist when sharing these menstrual experiences. For example, one participant said she found it funny how these things existed in her home, referring to the objects in the kit. And she explained this as she showed me a picture of how she had put them on a tray and then she would move them to a hidden place when she had guests over. Also, another participant made her experience more visible by provoking her partner and leaving the objects in sight. These stories of sharing or sheltering their experiences serve to highlight how ecologies for menstrual experiences need to be considered in design, and how these menstrual technologies become part of an already existing ecology of artifacts and social actors. In this work, we have shown that designing beyond the boundaries of the body can become a way to know and understand both the body and the self. And we'd like to make a call to incorporate bodily fluids in our designs. And as Maria Puig de la Bella Casa puts it, the world is constantly done and undone through encounters, which are not always those we might expect. The question of how we learn to live with others, being in the world, is an opening to becoming with, to be touched as much as to actively touch. We hope that our work can inspire the Chi community and that we have made a small dent in reconfiguring the societal discourse around menstruating bodies. Finally, I'd like to end this presentation with a hopeful yet a raw depiction or metaphor of what it's like to coexist with our bodies and our menstrual experiences by one of the participants in the study. And she says, "My feelings towards my menstruation could be compared to those I have towards bees. I don't enjoy being around them, but I appreciate the services they do. And every time they come back, I am glad that the world I know still exists, as in not being pregnant or still having fruit on the trees." And this paper was truly a collaborative effort, so I'd like to thank my co-authors, Louise, Maya, and Madeline, for being part of this work. I'd also like to thank the participants in the study for sharing their stories, and the people and places who helped with the design work and participant recruitment, and to everyone involved in the Chi process, the Chi submission process. And that's it. Thank you.